Hey there. On March 9th, 2013, at or in the evening, we're going to have a very important celebration in Indian Hindu faith. It's called Maha Shivaratri, which means the great night of Lord Shiva. And it happens on the same night every year. It's the 14th lunar day of the waning moon in the month of Falguna, which is the Indian months are tied to the lunar phases and to, the cosmos, not to the calendar, and at least not to the Gregorian calendar dates. So it's on what's called the 14th lunar day, Chaturdashi of Krishna Paksha, which is the waning moon. So Krishna 14 in the month of Falguna, that's how you would say this date. And it happens each year on this night because the astrological significance is what I'm going to talk about of this particular day. First of all, the thing to realize is that Shivaratri, which is this lunar phase, Krishna 14, happens 12 times a year. So every month, the moon and the sun and moon come together. That's what month comes from, moon, actually. They come together, and then that's the beginning of a cycle. The beginning of the new moon, what's called Amavasya, or the new moon, is when sun and moon come together. Then full moon, Purnima, is halfway in the cycle. Then, by this time the sun has moved here, we have another new moon. Actually, the sun isn't moving, it's the earth moving around the sun. So this is how time is measured. So we have the beginning of the cycle, and then, halfway in the cycle, and then the next new moon. So when the moon is like right here, right before the beginning of the next cycle, is Shivaratri each month. So the moon has gone like this, like right there, and we have Shivaratri each month, right there. So that's when we have Shivaratri, right before Krishna 14, because there's 30 days in a lunar month, 15 of what's called Shukla Paksha, which is waxing moon, Shukla Paksha, 15 days, and then 15 days of Krishna Paksha. And on the 14th of the 15th day is called Shivaratri. It's when so the moon is very dark. It's at the very end of a cycle, because the cycle starts, and then we go all the way around, and then boom, right there. So right before the new cycle starts is the night of Shiva. Every month, Krishna Chaturdashi, every month is Shivaratri. But Krishna Paksha of Chaturdashi, Krishna Paksha in Falguna month, which is what we have now, is Maha Shivaratri, the great night of Shiva. So you have a lot of these different types of celebrations in India where you have something happen like each month or even every few years, but then you have the great one, the Maha, just like you have the Kumbh Mela, then you have the Maha Kumbh Mela. So this is the Maha Shivaratri. Now, why this particular night? Why is this one so important to worship Shiva? Well, one of the things, if you've looked at pictures of Shiva, you see he's got the crescent moon on the forehead, the moon that's almost completely negated. That's what the moon tends to look like on Krishna 14, or also when the moon is waxing. So the moon only looks like that a few times. So when the moon is about to be completely obliterated, because on the new moon you can't see the moon at all. The moon is gone. And sometimes it's like that also on the Shivaratri, but it's the night right before the last lunar phase, because on the new moon, the moon is completely absorbed in the sun's rays. On the Shivaratri, it's right before. And it's not right after where it starts to wax again, because then after the moon also has the crescent shape, but it's starting to get bigger. Here it has the crescent shape because it's been getting smaller, decrease. The waning moon is a cycle of letting go. Letting go is analogous to surrender. This is what Shiva is about. Shiva is about surrender. It's about letting go of the form. And in fact, the waxing moon is really more related to Vishnu, which is about abundance and growth and life on earth. Waxing moon is about abundance, growth, life on earth. I want a family, I want money, I want a career. Waxing, I want things to be growing, I'm getting things. And then we have the full moon is the culmination of growth. And then after that, now we need to let go, let go, let go. So the waning cycle of the moon, Krishna Paksha, is about letting go, where the mind lets go of attachment. It doesn't mean we have to give away our money or anything like that. Those things are not related. They're inner experiences. Of course, they do have a correlation to the outer world too, because, you know, the mind expresses itself through form. This is why there's a feeling of decrease when the moon is waning. And this is in a natal chart as well. When the moon is waxing, like if you were born and the moon was on the waxing cycle, on Shukla Paksha, there's a feeling of increase. You have a feeling that things are growing, that things are getting better, that you're, at least externally. When the moon is waning from the natal chart, there's a feeling of loss. There's a feeling of decrease. And again, there's a difference in the word loss and decrease and surrender and liberation. But actually, they're the same thing. Loss feels like losing something. Like if I say, it's the cycle of liberation, you're like, oh, liberation. I want to be liberated. If I say it's loss, you're like, I don't want loss. I don't want to lose anything. I want to be liberated. Liberated sounds like you're growing something, like you're getting something. Loss sounds like you're losing something. But they're actually very much the same thing. They're about letting go. They're about detachment. They're about remembering the source. And this is Shiva energy. So the waning cycle of the moon in general is related to Shiva. By the way, I don't know if this is in any scripture. This is just how I see it, because again, Vishnu is about the world, Shiva is about the other world. So when we get to Krishna 14, Chaturdashi, it's right before we've totally negated the world. Because really in Amavasya, in the new moon, that's actually Shiva without manifest creation. You could look at it that way. That cycle of the moon is where there's not even existence, what you might call pralaya, where everything is, where it's just silence, where there's not even form. The lunar phase before form is completely gone is Chaturdashi, the 14th lunar day. And that's why it's also one of the most harsh lunar days for external stuff. It's related to the goddess Kali. It's about destruction. But again, we see Kali and we see that fearsome form and we think, oh, it's going to take my stuff away. Again, that's one way to look at it, but it's also to liberate me from the things I'm attached to. That's the other way to look at it. And by the way, you can look at it either way, and that's the difference between a sadhu, a yogi, and a bogey, or which is what we all are. We're all in the world. I'm not judging because I'm the same way. I want stuff. I want to have, I don't want to lose. And if I lose, I want to be able to lose it because I've let go of it, not because it's been taken from me. There's a difference. So pay attention to that. If you're letting go of things, it's through your own will. One of the biggest things we need to learn to do as people, once we incarnate, is learn to let go of things. We have this iron grip, this white knuckle grip with things. And it's because we want to attain it all, because we're trying to be the true God that we are. So that feels to the mind like acquisition on some level. Really, it's when people are pursuing money or greed or anything, it's really an attempt to acquire the true self. So it's understandable that we equate loss with I'm getting further away from becoming everything. But this is the creative quality of loss. Letting go, detachment. And so Maha Shivaratri and Krishna Chaturdashi is the time when the mind is still there. It's still the world of the mind of the world, but we willingly negate it. And we are like, when it's over on Amavasya. It ends on the new moon. So symbolized by staying up that night, is, symbolic of that waning crescent becoming completely absorbed in the void. So you see that, like the Bharatanatyam or the Odissi dancers do when they indicate Shiva often. Now I'm going to do something silly, but they'll go like, you see them go like, especially that fierce form, they'll put that, I guess it's here or this one. But this is to symbolize that crescent moon on the forehead, and they'll put it up there. That's when you know they're talking about Shiva, and their eyes will often get like, oh, I'm going to burn you with my third eye. I'm Shiva. So if you ever see them do an Indian dance and the finger goes up by the side of the head, I don't know which one they do it. Obviously, I don't do Bharatanatyam. I don't do Indian dance. But you'll see they do that. They're symbolizing they do other things for Shiva too, but this is one that you'll see often. Now, this particular Shivaratri, you see here we have the chart. It's quite auspicious. In fact, for the next couple years, I haven't looked into each Shivaratri, but usually Venus, what happens is the sun is up here in Aquarius, and the full moon, it's called Falguna, because the Indian months, it's kind of interesting, it's kind of a rough estimation of where the full moon, will have been that month or something. This is a general explanation, but Falguna is kind of called because one of the nakshatras in Leo is called Purva Falguni. So that's why it's called Falguna that month. Each of the Indian months have this relationship with one of the nakshatras. So when we have Shivaratri, usually the sun is in either Aquarius or Capricorn. Sometimes it's in February. Again, it's hard to know exactly when it's going to happen because it's based on the lunar calendar, not based on the Gregorian calendar or a calendar of months. It's based on cosmic time. It's when this Shivaratri happens. Usually the sun is either in Aquarius or Capricorn, Saturn-ruled signs, which is about solitude. It's about stillness, peace, solitude, tapas, the night, embracing death. These are all qualities of Shani or Saturn. And even the goddess Kali, who is the most identified with Krishna Chaturdashi, is related to Saturn. So it's really, Kali literally means, it literally means time, the personification of time. Kala is time. Kali, when you put an E on the end, it means the feminine. It's the feminine nature, which is the expression of that thing. So that's what goddess Kali, with all those weapons and that ferocity, is really to personify time. The personification of time is that it's going to destroy everything. It's going to chop off your head, which means change your ideas. It's going to chop off your arms, which means remove your attachments. It's going to happen. So you see Shiva, when you look at pictures of Kali, Shiva is laying at her feet underneath. So the substratum of time is Shiva, and then the expression of it is this kind of fierce energy. These are very rich metaphors for Krishna Chaturdashi as well. So Saturn is usually the ruler of the sun, and the planets are in Saturn's sign usually when that happens, and this is no different. They're in Aquarius. We have the sun in Aquarius, and then Venus and Mercury are also there. And, of course, the moon is also there. So this is the day before sun and moon come together. So usually the sun and moon are in the same sign. Sometimes they're not, but it's actually the day before. So the sun and moon are about 24 degrees apart. So it's also quite likely that they won't be in the same Rashi, which is the same sign. On Saturday night's Shivaratri, they are. The moon has just gone into Dhanishta. You see, the sun is 25 degrees and the moon is 128, so they're about 24 degrees apart. And so this particular one, the nakshatra of the moon is Dhanishta, and I actually have this right for the moment when Shivaratri starts. You can see it starts exactly at 5:30 Pacific time, 5:34. If I go back 1 minute, you can watch it right here. You see, this is Chaturdashi. If I go back 1 minute, it's Triyodashi. So at 5:33 p.m. Pacific time. 5:33 p.m. Pacific time it's still Triadashi. 5:34 p.m. is Chaturdashi. So those of you having Shivaratri celebrations, Chaturdashi officially happens at 5:34 Pacific time. Of course, that's 8:34 Atlantic time in the U.S. So at that moment, this is the moment of Chaturdashi on the Pacific coast. You have Leo rising opposite these planets. So all these planets are in the 7th house on the Pacific coast of the U.S. when Chaturdashi begins. The 7th house is about other people, so cutting other people out of your life. That's what it's about. Get rid of them all. Kidding. No, so it's really about, the 7th house has to do with others and literally, on some level, having detachment about our interactions with others. Healthy boundaries, things like that could be an interesting sort of subplot, at least on the West Coast. Of course, that's where I live, so people on the West Coast of the U.S. But besides your local experience, having Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Moon all in Aquarius is very much about a sort of communal, social situation that we can be, detached from, and detached from the ambition of the world and from our identity, even our sort of cultural identity. So Shivaratri happens when the moon is in these signs ruled by Saturn, and in this particular instance, and the reason I said for the next couple of years it'll be powerful is because, for one thing, Saturn will be exalted for the next, at least through next year's Shivaratri as well. And he was also there last year for Shivaratri. And this year, Saturn is exchanging with Venus. So Venus is in Saturn's sign, and Saturn is in Venus's sign. So this is very powerful, what's called Sambandha. It brings together the energies of Saturn and Venus, which are about detachment, introspection, letting go, surrender, all those things I talked about that we need to do when we embrace Shiva energy, and what we need to do to embrace Chaturdashi, which is letting go, surrender, are related to Saturn. This is what Saturn is about. And this is why I think it happens on Falguna rather than other months, because if it happens in Falguna, it's almost certain that the sun's going to be in Saturn-ruled signs. It's either going to be in Capricorn or in Aquarius. Usually, I think. I'm pretty sure that's right. And so this means it's going to be the new moon in Saturn's sign. So again, if it's the month before, it might be in Sagittarius. If it's the month after, it might be in Pisces. So pretty much ensures, I think, that the new moon's going to be in Saturn's signs, which is about solitude, aloneness, introspection. And so there's a few great stories about Shivaratri. Well, I should just finish. And so with Saturn exalted, especially exchanging with Venus, its ruler, it unifies the qualities of solitude, which is Saturn's deal, and connection, which is relating to others. Because we often have a real extreme relationship with others. Either we're hypnotized and identified and delusional about how happy they can make us, or we go to the other extreme and say, well, then the hell with it. I'm rejecting. We're either way too far one side or way too far the other side. Many times, you think? So this exchange between Venus and Saturn has actually brought a lot of healthy realism to that idea, the last month and a half or so, because Venus has actually been going through Saturn-ruled signs. But this is why Saturn is exalted in Libra, because it brings together the qualities of detachment, solitude, being practical, realistic, humble, appreciating what we get rather than being disappointed because of what we didn't get. It brings those things into the area of relationships and relating with people, which is Libra. So the fact that Saturn and Venus are then exchanging makes that a very active principle. It's not just a concept. It's not just conceptual. In fact, and the fact of having Rahu joined right now too also makes it brings a lot of celestial potential, because Rahu and Ketu, the nodes, are about this enormous expansive potential. So it could be really powerful Shivaratri with Saturn, Venus, especially with exalted Saturn joined Rahu and Saturn and Venus in an exchange. Of course, people focus on Mercury retrograde too much usually, but the fact that Mercury's retrograde and Saturn is also retrograde planets have a quality of introspection. They're moving backwards. So this is a great time for introspection right now. Anyway, Mercury retrograde are great times to introspect, to slow down, to reflect. Saturn is retrograde almost half the time anyway, so it's not unusual for Saturn to be retrograde. Having Saturn and Mercury retrograde is good, especially because Mercury, again, is joined Venus, which is exchanging with Saturn. So again, this whole Shivaratri is really tied together with this exchange between between Venus and Saturn. It'll probably be that way next year as well. I haven't looked at the thing for 2014, but Venus will probably be in Saturn-ruled signs also, and Saturn's going to be in Libra then too. So this is a powerful connection, powerful sambandha on this Shivaratri. So it means you'll probably be able to stay awake, which is a good beginning, and you'll probably feel a great connection with your community, and it'll be a great way to make a deeper commitment to that community as well. Especially a community of culture. Aquarius is the cultural world, the world of society, of people, of institutions. Whereas Pisces is the next sign, which has to do more with maybe our spiritual community. But that's also part of Aquarius, so it's a great time to really connect with that. There's a couple great stories. This is getting long. I didn't intend it to be. It's already 20 minutes, so I can tend to go on, especially when I'm talking about Shiva and the mystical qualities of astrology, because I think it's really important to investigate and explore those things. But there's a couple really important stories on Shivaratri. One has to do with, at the time of creation, when they were churning the milk ocean, all this poison came out, and Lord Shiva, because the poison at the bottom of the mind, this is what the churning of the milk ocean story is about. It's about the forces of light and dark within our mind. The milk ocean is the mind, where we're trying to extract the soma from the mind. The lord of Chandra, which is the mind, is Varuna, which is the soma. So we're trying to extract the soma from the mind, and there's this dynamic between the forces of light and dark in our mind and consciousness. When that happens, this poison, once we start to churn the mind through meditation and sadhana and stuff like Shivaratri and yoga, we become aware of all the poison in our mind, and it scares us. We want to stop. We're like, my God, I'm crazy. Before I was covering up that craziness with distraction. Now I'm not being distracted anymore. And so I'm doing sadhana, and I'm purifying, and I'm churning the mind, and all this poison is coming out, and it scares the hell out of me. I want to stop. I was happier before I started meditating. You hear this a lot, right? Maybe if you've gone on the spiritual journey, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, this story is illustrated by the churning of the milk ocean, and Lord Shiva comes out and drinks the poison and holds it in his throat. Nilakantaya, Nilakanta. Blue-throated one. This is what Shiva is. Shiva is there. He's the tamasic god. It means he's there to protect and to hold that darkness for us. It's the part of you that is strong enough to handle it. That's the way to look at it. Rather than Shiva, something out there, it's the part of you that is strong enough that you can drink the poison and hold it in your throat and not swallow it. You don't have to swallow it. You can hold it in your throat. And just keep it there until the soma in the mind and the pot of soma is extracted. Then you feel the purity in the mind. So you don't have to be afraid of the poison destroying all of creation. Shiva is there as a part of your being to hold that strength. And that's what Shiva energy is in you. It's the part, and if when we worship the deity externally, what we're doing is we're summoning the force internally. When you say Om Namah Shivaya and you say Maha Mrityunjaya mantra and you listen to or recite the Sri Rudram or the Shiva Sahasranama or whatever it is, when you call that energy, when you say the mantra, it calls the energy to you. You don't believe me? Do it. Say Mahamrityunjaya mantra 108 times. It'll only take you 10 minutes. And see what happens. See how you feel. See if you're ready to like take on the world. Or at least ready to deal with the poison in your mind. So this isn't belief. It's not worship. It's not religion. It is, but it's not. It's based on science. Vedic religion is based on science. It's based on Sanskrit syllables. It's based on all of the spiritual technology that the Vedic people knew. So they created deities and stories so that we'll fall in love with it, so it'll captivate our mind, rather than say, do this scientific thing. And that's too dry. The beauty of Hinduism and Vedic teaching is it's alive with the juice of love. Yeah? All of the erotic tales of Shiva and Parvati is just to illustrate the sun and the moon. If someone says the sun and the moon does this, you'd be like, whatever. But if you understand the origin of our universe and of our solar system and all, you see it, you start to totally see how the ecstatic dance between the sun and the moon is Shiva and Devi, Parvati. All the destruction, all of this is illustrated in these stories. And so things like Shivaratri bring it together. Chaturdashi, destruction of illusion, letting go. It's related to Shiva. You see these stories of Shiva have to do with drinking the poison, purifying. It's all related to the sun as well. The sun and the moon and their dance. So that story is to illustrate calling and what you do. It's not just, oh, that's a nice story. Great. That's a great place to start, but it's only a starting point. What we really need to do is then do the practice, do the sadhana. And this is the night to actually do it, to stay up all night and say the mantras, sing the bhajans, call in Shiva energy, and see what happens. You'll see it's not just a myth. You will feel Shiva. He will come. He doesn't come from out there. He comes from in here. He's here. They're always with us. It's just we don't see it. We don't see them because our mind is covered with a veil of constant thinking, of constant buddhi, like Patanjali says in the Yoga Sutras. Yoga is stilling the mind. Once the thought waves are stilled, we rest in our true nature. Our true nature is an embodiment of all of these forces, but it's just obscured. Another story has to do with the famous night of Shiva where a simple villager went into the woods to get firewood, and he got lost and couldn't find his way out of the woods after the sun went down, and then he started hearing the wild animals howling in the forest, and he became scared, so he climbed up a tree to ride out the evening, and he was scared. He was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and he climbed up in a tree and to wait out the night so the wild animals wouldn't get him, and he heard wild animals scurrying under the trees, growling at him and all during the night. And he was terrified. He even, cried, "Oh, Shiva, please help me," throughout the night. And he was sitting in a tree, and he, as he always did, he recited Shiva mantras, like Om Namah Shivaya or something. And each time he said a mantra, he would pluck a leaf and drop it on the ground. Om Namah Shivaya, pluck a leaf and drop it on the ground. And he was, crying tears of agony. He was scared he would get eaten, and he was praying to Shiva to not, to survive. And at the end of the night, as the sun rose and he had finished and he could see, then he realized that at the bottom of the tree there was a Shiva lingam. Shiva lingam is a form of Lord Shiva in the form of this structure of a lingam, and he had been dropping the leaves from a tree called the betel tree, B-E-T-E-L. It's a little fruit, and he had been dropping the leaves of the betel fruit on the lingam all night, which is a way to worship Lord Shiva, and his tears had washed the lingam. This is one of the things that you do on Shivaratri, is you bathe the lingam with different, with different fluids, water and ghee and yogurt and honey and rose water. So, he was just a common villager. So it was his tears that bathed the lingam, and then you offer betel leaves, and he was offering leaves of the betel tree as well. So he didn't realize, but he was performing a sacred ritual properly by sitting in the tree, crying, bathing the lingam with his tears, and then making offerings to Shiva, because he was saying Om Namah Shivaya and offering a betel leaf onto the lingam. And so this got Shiva's attention, and the common villager became enlightened. He became, Shiva gave him the enlightenment, the great boon. Again, this is another story about us. It's like, oh, that's sweet. It is sweet. It's a beautiful story, and it's about worshiping Shiva, but it's also about who we are. We think we're this big, mighty thing. We're just really a common beggar on some level, unless we've attained the truth. We're scared in the dark. I mean, every one of us can relate to this story. If you were in the woods, you'd be scared to death hearing wild animals growling. As much as we insulate ourselves from that, but that's the reality. We're scared. We're terrified of dying. We're attached to this form. And so, and again, it's a symbol of the mind and the darkness and the howling animals in our mind, which really torment us. I mean, who can't relate to that symbol? It's a beautiful symbol, beautiful story. And the villager, being a common villager, it's the innocence of a child. He wasn't some sophisticated, Brahmin. There's many stories of how those, how the Brahmins, we tend to, also denote a certain arrogance of, oh, I know what I'm doing the proper worship. One of the great things of Lord Shiva is it said Shiva accepts all. He sees the devotion, all of them accept all, but there are, what all of the deities and sadgurus and beings see is what's authentically in your heart. And any kind of pretense, it doesn't matter if you're a trained priest, if you're arrogant, that's called the law of karma. That's what karma really is. It's a way to illustrate karma. Lord Shiva sees the purity in your heart, the pure devotion. All the deities do. All of the beings, sadgurus, they see the purity in your heart. Because the ego is very cunning. We can learn all the ritual and then be doing it because, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, and if I do this, I'll get the boon, or I'll get money, or I'll get this. That kind of thing, the law of karma always legislates that. Karma is a principle of the universe that is always in tune with what's happening in our heart. So the simplicity of the villager shows the simplicity and the beginner's mind and the innocence that needs to be in our mind. We need to return to that, not in some unempowered, silly way, but realize that we are just a scared little villager in a forest of wild animals. Underneath it all, we're scared and we want help. There's nothing unempowering about that. And again, in the West, we were so arrogant. I'm not scared. I don't need to, worship and devotion. It's not to exploit us. We're so cunning about being exploited in the West because we're so cynical about religion. These aren't religious tales. The religious part, or the which is what these stories are about, are to open your heart so that you'll do the practices. Again, the theme of this story is he was saying Shiva mantras all night. Not that he was sitting there shivering, believing in Shiva. He was doing sadhana. He was saying Shiva's mantras over again and plucking leaves. It's kind of a way to bring to life the idea of what we do on Shivaratri, which is say Shiva mantras over again and make offerings to the lingam. What you can do is imagine yourself as this simple villager, this simple being who's scared of the wild animals. And again, Shiva is the lord of the wild animals as well. Pashupati, Rudra, the lord of the hunt. And Shiva, and see yourself in that situation when you're doing the offerings. It's a great story if you're going to Shivaratri celebrations and you tell stories, which often happens. Tell that story before you do the offering. It's very powerful to feel to realize this about yourself and to have compassion for yourself. We can all have compassion for this person scared in the woods, in the tree, crying, I don't want to die, He's got a family. He went in to get firewood for his family, He doesn't want to die getting eaten by animals or something. So we can all relate to that. and connect with that compassion. And this is where these stories come from. It shows the compassion of the deity, and it also evokes our compassion for ourselves, for each other, and gives this particular story that I wanted to tell gives a specific frame for how to approach the worship of Shiva, the worship of offering to the lingam from a place that feels, innocent and sweet and full of appreciation. So anyway, I didn't plan on this to be 35 minutes, but Shivaratri, Mahashivaratri is really, it's one of the most sacred nights in Indian culture and in Hinduism. I tend to shy away from using Hinduism, not because I have a problem with it, because people think, oh, that's your religion. Again, Hinduism as a religion is based on practices. And if you do yoga or any kind of Vedic Indian practice, worship, belief, Shivaratri is a night to stay up all night and worship the great god Mahadeva, the great Lord, the Lord of yoga. That's what Shiva is, the Lord of silence, peace, detachment. That's just, when you connect with that, boy, you're connecting with the source. It's a great thing. It's a beautiful thing to cultivate a relationship with Lord Shiva, Mahadeva. So I hope you do that. Find a place to celebrate Maha Shivaratri. Om Namah Shivaya.